Hey everyone, it's Megan. Welcome to my fall front door class. As you get started and you get set up for my class today, be sure to take a couple minutes to grab your supplies. In this class, I use watercolors. You can use any watercolors that you may have at home. You can grab an array of brushes, really small detail brushes for some of these other details, and then some medium-sized brushes up to an inch or so is fine for some of the background detail. I would also encourage you to grab a ruler and a pencil for today's class. Always something to paint on. I was painting on acrylic paper or watercolor paper, and a cup of water, a palette or a paper plate to mix your colors on, and a paper towel for any messes. Be sure to hit the subscribe button if you're not subscribed to my channel, and have fun with this one. And be sure to make any comments below in our comment area. And if you have any questions along the way, do not hesitate to reach out. Have fun. Take care, everybody. I cannot wait to see your artwork. All right. Welcome everyone to today's class. Here's Miss Dory is joining. If you have any questions for tonight's class, please let me know. As always, be yourself, ask questions. We're going to keep things really fun and light. Tonight's inspiration is a beautiful front door inspiration. I posted it in the chat, so if you haven't seen it yet, feel free to do that. I'm just going to pull it up here on my other screen. As always in these classes, I encourage you to pick and choose what colors you want to use. I will guide you through what steps we're doing one at a time, but we're just going to have a good time and, take this with ease. I'll go through. All right. So the first thing that we're going to do is, if you have a pencil handy, it's always helpful to have a pencil for some of these classes. And if you happen to have a ruler or a straight edge at home, whether it's, look, I have a box of thank you notes right here. A straight edge will help us with the structure of our door and the placement of our objects. So tonight's a really great class for you to, if you have a pencil in your home, to outline the door frame, if anything. And for me, you can think about, how wide your door frame may be. For me, it's going to be centered, and maybe I'll do, a 4-inch door or a 3.5-inch door. And I'm not going to center it perfectly. If you want to, you can, but I'm just going to do some guidelines for my door. So I'm just going to start with the width of the door, and I'm just going to try to center the width, kind of using my eye. So if I have my finger here at the 4 and the over here at the 1, I'm going to do a 4-inch door personally. And I think I'm painting on, this might be 9 by 12 paper. I'm not sure. But I'm just going to do just a couple marks. And I just did a couple marks to center the door. I want some height above my door, and I'm using a light pencil. So I'm going to do we're going to do just a few minutes of sketching. You can have your door up as high or as low as you want. So I'm going to do a light pencil, soft outlines for my door. I'm going to outline the top. And then the door is going to end, you're going to leave a little bit of room at the bottom, maybe 3-4 inches at the bottom for your stairs. So my door may end, I don't know, down here. So I want you to draw that rectangular for the door frame. So any way you want to do that, feel free to do that now. And a light pencil is great. You don't need to push down hard. Sometimes if you do a pencil and you do a soft erase over it, that's fine. And again, your door can be as wide or as narrow as you wish. There we go. So it's not perfect, but it's pretty close. My door is kind of wide. That's all right. I don't mind wide door. And if you need to adjust any of these lines, feel free. You can use any style pencil. And if you wanted to do like a light erase, you could. And if you wanted to do like a couple of lines for your stairs, you could. Maybe just a couple underneath. And they could be a little wider. So I'm just going to do a couple of horizontal lines coming out a little wider. This is just going to help us ground us with the composition. And then we can do as much or as little as we please. The stairs are going to kind of fade in to the left and the right.
So I'm gonna do 3 lines at the bottom for the stairs. And my goal is to I'm centering all these objects, right? So you can see I've just kind of centered the door and I've kind of centered these floating stairs per se. And the door, it's just a door. We're here to have fun. I'm not striving for perfection. Any details that you want to do inside of the door, like there's 2 different designs. So on the first inspiration, there's kind of a rectangular window here with some larger interiors. So if you wanted to sketch any of that in, you could. I'm going to do the door on the left of the inspiration. So it has 4 quadrants. I'm going to do that one. So there's a lot of different ways you can do this. So, and if you don't want to sketch it, you don't have to. For me, it's going to help me. And I'm just going to eyeball this. It may not be perfectly even, which some of you may want this perfectly even. I'm just going to kind of roll with it. I'm just going to do rectangles in each of these. And one way I'm doing these rectangles is I'm just going to put a couple of marks here and there. I'm going to leave a little bit. I did 1, 2, 3, 4 dots. And I'm just kind of moving my ruler to the left, to the right rather. And I can adjust these as I need to, but I'm gonna have some of that padding in the middle. And then I'll connect all these dots. So this is just a little bit of work ahead of time. So my door has like some nice firm boxiness. And this will help it kind of look better in the end. So I'll bring this a little closer. So I kind of did, let me see my lighting here. So I did a 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to do 4 rectangles basically within this space. And as I start sketching these on, you'll see what those are. Now you could freehand this, but usually doors like to be structured, right? With those straight lines. So it's good to just take a couple minutes. And you can design your door, and there's like, you could have the small window up top. You could, and this isn't perfectly even, so I'm just kind of playing around. I'm going to do all my vertical lines first, and then I'm going to flip my ruler. So there's my vertical line, so you can see where I'm going here. It's not perfectly even, but I'm here for fun, for fun tonight. And I can always shift some of these lines if I need to, but then I just come in with my horizontals. And you want these as straight as possible. And I can come in and do a light erase to fix some of this, but this will help us paint within the lines as needed. So the one on the left is a little bit bigger, so I can adjust one side or the other if I wanted to. So I'm just doing these 4 long rectangular areas within each. So one's a lot bigger. It's okay. I'm going to bring one of these in a little bit. You can always erase and adjust. It's no problem. No problem at all. There we go. And I could make my door a little taller if I wanted to make it taller. But this will get us going for the composition. And this, taking a few minutes to sketch always will boost your confidence with regards to the framework and the overall structure. Many, many, many artists will sketch before they get started. Now this side, if I'm being, very anal with detail, this side's a little wider than this side. So if I wanted to, make adjustments, I could certainly, maybe bring this line in a little bit to make this one a little wider. Absolutely up to you. I could also just, reshape the door. Let's take a few minutes and be playful here. If your pencil lines are too dark, you could do a soft erase for your pencil lines. I might just bring the door over a little bit to make this a little bit more even. So I'm going to make the door a little skinnier on this side. There we go. and I'm just gonna erase the exterior line of this door. So you can pick and choose what lines you want and where. And we're not gonna do a ton more sketching. If you wanted to like put in some lights, you could, or you could just paint some lights in. If you wanted to put a door frame around your door, you could do that now as well. So I have a rectangular door and I just have 3 lines for the steps. Most doors have a door frame, right? So if you wanted to do a door frame around your door, you can turn your paper. And then we could just paint and have fun, right? Once these lines are in, we can figure out what colors we want to paint things. We can do some fun design details, etc. Where's my lines? And I'm eyeballing, so the door frame is the same width all the way around. And light pencil lines are a good thing. And door frame's gonna come really like right to the bottom of the door. So I'm gonna maybe make a line. So right here to the bottom of the door is gonna be the door frame. Because the doors typically go to right to the ground level, right? So if there's little lines coming down, I'm just gonna keep those off. So I have a door and I have some steps. So I probably just did that pretty quickly. So take a few minutes if you need to play with that. If there's other elements that you'd like to add in, that you would like your ruler for, feel free. I'm going to leave my stairs as is, as 3 lines. I'm going to keep that easy. And if you wanted to add any lines for like slatting, so like house, paneling or siding, you could do a little bit of light lines for the pants for the siding of the house. I'm gonna do a little bit because I might do, and I'm gonna try to eyeball them. And I'm just doing soft lines. I'm not going all the way out to the edge, but I'm just gonna do, I don't know, a 1/2 inch or so. I'm just gonna eyeball it. You can make them as tall as you want. And I'm just gonna do soft horizontal siding lines so I can play with a little bit of watercolor there. And I'm just gonna eyeball them to have them be as even as a height. We want them all the height to be fairly straightforward and standard. I'm gonna like let my watercolor just kind of flow off the edges. So these are all like unfinished edges. I'm gonna let my watercolor kind of flow. But I'm going on the left and the right of the door. And I'm just doing some soft siding lines for my house. Now this is optional. And this is a really fun part of the process where you get to make some of those choices of what you want to add and where. If you don't want to do siding, you don't have to. I want to add a little siding. I don't know what color I want my house to be yet. I could do gray. I could, if I do a blue door, I could do gray house. If I wanted to do, you choose the house colors. You could do your house if you wanted to. That's always fun. Or you could just do something more neutral. I'm doing fairly soft colors and neutral tonight. So you can pick and choose. And I'm just doing soft little lines. You can see my siding is coming in. I'm just doing horizontal lines on the left and the right side of the door. Just take a couple breaths, play with your sketching. Drawing can be really scary, so just give yourself a little grace to be playful here. We could have just started painting, but this will just help give our artwork a little bit more structure for tonight's class. And I can do a soft erase for my siding if I want to. If I want to put in those pretty lights. Do a little bit of a siding above the door. I'm not going to go all the way up to the top. I just kind of have things centered. Maybe I think we're just going to leave it at that. So I just have some siding around my door, and I'll do my door handle and all that after. But I have, some of these panels. If I want to, I'll put a wreath on, all that, okay? And again, a soft erase is not a bad thing. Now, whether you are, doing watercolors or acrylics, there's different ways of layering color in. So as you're finishing your sketching, I'll talk through ways we could apply color tonight. So with watercolor, you typically work light to dark, and with watercolor, you want to paint the objects that are, you can paint the objects in the foreground, so you don't have to paint over like paint that's already in the background. If you paint objects that are in the foreground, you're going to have the pure color go right onto the white canvas underneath here. You don't have to compete with a blue door, right? If you paint a blue door first and then compete with the colors of blue under the watercolor, of an orange wreath per se. So we could start with our wreath, which could be a really fun thing to do. I didn't think about this, but if anybody, maybe we'll start with a wreath. If you have something round in your home, well, this is the top of a candle. Look at that. Wouldn't that be a cute little wreath right there? I might find something round around you. You can take a minute and go to your kitchen if you need to. And maybe we do a round shape for our wreath. And this is kind of a neat idea because you can play with positioning, right? I'm just going to use this because this is what I have. And this can kind of give us a little bit of positioning, but also shape wise as we play with decorating our wreath. So I'm just going to, once you find an object, and take your time here, there's no rush. I just traced it. And I'm going to just do where I know I'm going to have things. My wreath maybe is going to have a bunch of stuff inside. I'm just going to do a soft erase. So there's no pencil underneath it. So see how I'm kind of just, if I take a 1/2 inch and I go all the way around the wreath, maybe I do a soft erase on the circle. So I can paint right on top of this. And then we'll paint our door underneath it after. So we have full color for our wreath. That could be really fun. Now we could get lost in all these colors tonight. So we'll go slow, but I want to make sure that you can follow along. Now what I did again is I did an outline of my wreath and I did a soft erase on the pencil all the way around. And then I kind of erased some of the door where my wreath decorations are going to be. So I'm just going to jump right into it. Your wreath can be fall-like colors. You could have greens. So I'm going to do, I'll zoom down for you a little bit here. I'm going to do reds and I'm going to do reds and oranges for like some faux leaves. And I'm going to tuck in some green foliage as well. So I would encourage you to just grab a small brush of choice. And Dory, if anybody else is using acrylics, you could do this with me or you can paint the door first. It's totally up to you, but I'm just going to jump in. And I'm going to get a little bit of red going. I'll bring this over here so you can see it. I'm going to get a little bit of red on my palette. I'm going to start with red because, hey, why? This is like an orangey red. Might as well. And you can do little leaves, ladies and gents. You can do little flowers. This is your wreath. In the inspiration, there's little flowers and there's leaf styles. So I'm going to do wet brush on dry paper to have the most control over my areas. And I'm just going to start by adding little bits. Maybe I'll do some little flowers. And I'm just going to start to build my wreath. Now I'm going to start with one object and I'm going to work my way around. So I'm doing like these little flowers, little red leaves. And I'm just getting a little paint and I'll put this down a little bit more for you so you can see it. And this is my wreath and I'm just going to add a little bit here and there, and I'm just gonna fill it in. Now, I don't want to spend, you can spend as much or as little time here as you wish. But have some fun. There is no risk here. We're just building a beautiful wreath. This wreath can be, it can be a fall wreath. It can be a holiday wreath, anything you want. And I like doing different sizes. And I'm just doing one color first, and then I'm going to switch and do another color. See that? So you can see the shape of the circle. Oh, I'm so glad we did that. And then I'm just going to grab another color. I have a little bit of an orange here. Mix your color on your plate first, a little water, a little bit of that pigment. Same thing with acrylic. Just find your next color whenever you're ready. Ooh, this is so much fun. I'm doing little tiny dainty brush strokes. It's just my style tonight. I'm just having fun. I'm not overthinking it. I'm just following my intuition. It's one of the best parts of these classes. Just you do you, right? I'm going to tuck green in after. So you can see I have little gaps here and there. If you want to have fun and like mix some of these colors together, you could do that. But I'm going for oranges. I'm going to probably grab a little bit of a darker red. Ooh, this is a punchy red. Let's see here. So you can find the colors that you like. Ooh, this is so fun. The more water you use, the lighter the colors will be. The less water you use, you can see here. Ooh. And I'm going to show you a trick on how to fill in all these little white gaps too. And I'm going to tuck some green in here too. So I'm leaving a little bit of white gaps for some green. You want to have some wild stray, pieces coming off here and there. You can have as much contrast or as little contrast as you wish. Ooh, it's coming along. So pretty. Kind of looks summery a little bit. But I could create some darker red too, like a cranberry. So watch this. I take a little bit of red here and I have black over here on my watercolor palette, and I could get a little bit of black up here. So I'm dipping a wet brush onto my watercolor and I'm just bringing a little black in. Look at this. I can make this kind of darker cranberry color. Ooh, it's like purpley. That's a nice color. And I can tuck in a little bit of extra contrast here and there. And I'm going to put green in here too, but I'm having fun, which is the most important thing. We've never done a wreath like this in our classes. If anyone has any questions along the way, don't hesitate to ask. And if you're watching this tutorial, you're welcome to comment on the YouTube space below with any questions you have. But really just follow your gut here. And I love the way this is coming out. It's really fun. But I'm going to let it dry for a minute before I put the green on. Now, watercolor dries typically pretty quickly, unless you have some like large blotches of red. But maybe as it's drying, you can work on your door. So I don't want to mix any greens with this yet, because if that green gets anywhere near these oranges, we're going to have brown, ladies. So we don't want brown on our door unless you want that on purpose. So there's that. I'm going to let it dry. I'm going to do a soft erase with my pencil on some of the door. Lost my pencil. Where did it go? There it is. So my pencil's pretty heavy. I'm going to just do a soft erase on some of these pencil lines around my door, because I'm going to start to paint my door in a little bit. I'm just going to do a soft erase so I can still see these lines. I'm going to do my green once the wreath has dried. So I'm just kind of doing a soft erase on some of these rectangles. And I'll give you some tricks. So we're going to work light to dark. And you can do light to dark if you're doing acrylics too. So no big deal there. So what does light to dark mean? Light to dark means whatever color door you're doing. So I think that Miss Janice, who's on, might do a yellow door. So you do a light yellow, Janice. And if you're doing a blue door, like me, you can do a light blue, very, very light. And I'll show you how to do that. So any size brush you wish. I'm using a number 3. I feel the most control. And then you can take a couple dollops of water and put it right on your tray so it's nice and clear. And I'm going to grab a little bit of blue. And then you can play with how much pigment you have. Now I want this fairly light, so you can bring more water. See that? You can make it nice and light. And you can fill your door in where you wish. Oh God, stay in the lines, Megan. That would be good. And you can fill your door in. Again, we're going light to dark. So we're going to add more darker elements to this door. I'm going to start filling in my door. And I'm going to do the whole darn thing, because I'm going to do some outlining. So I'm going to go in between, in the middle here. I'm going to go around my wreath. Again, if you need to do a light erase. Oh, this is going to be so pretty. I'm gonna do some darker elements to outline some of those rectangles on the inside. You can leave a little bit of white space around your wreath if you wanted to, especially if you're gonna add in some green. You can play with where you add in a little heavier pigment. It's up for you to play with. I'm doing a really soft blue right now because I can always make it darker. With watercolor, you start with the lighter colors because you have control over making it darker, but you can't make something lighter, right? So we just slow down. We're just gonna do a little bit. My blue door is coming to life. I'm gonna mix a little bit more paint pigment, going pretty soft at the moment. So that's a darker blue. That means I need to add more water to dilute this. And you can always use a different reservoir or, an area on your palette or your plate. And I'm just gently filling in my door, enjoying the process. And my door frame, maybe it will be gray. I haven't decided yet. Maybe it will be a white door frame and I do a house color of gray or whatever. You can decide those things. So I'm just doing my door only right now. And I'm going to make some areas of my door darker. So again, we're working dark to light. And it's the same thing with acrylic paints. If you're using acrylics tonight, we'll do darker accents with darker blue after. So you can make a darker blue pigment, a blended of color after. And you can, whenever you're ready, you can try doing that whenever you wish. But what we're gonna do is I have a darker blue here. We're gonna outline the rectangles that are on the interior. Ooh. So you can wait for it to dry or you can play with it bleeding a little bit. It's up to you. I'm just being in the moment here. So you probably should let it dry a little bit. You can see how mine bled because I was doing wet on wet. And when you do wet brush on a wet canvas, it will bleed a little bit. So you can always wipe it with your finger. Look at this. I just kind of cleaned up that line a little bit. Maybe go to a dry area if you're using watercolor. There you go. So you can choose how much wet on wet or wet on dry you want to use here. Maybe you can do a little bit of water and move the water around. It's all for fun, but we're going to basically be outlining these rectangles. And then you can play with where you want to add a little bit of additional shading on the inside. So if I first start by doing a little bit of outlining with these rectangles, you can start to see the inner panel of that door. Well, you can be playful with how antique-y, or how much shading you want to bring inside of that. See how that frame is starting to come to life a little bit? So again, if the paper is dry, if you're doing acrylics, it's not too much, but you can play with bringing in a little bit of water, moving it around on the inside of these panels. So we're outlining the panels, and you can do the same technique with acrylics, using darker blue acrylic paint to outline the inside of those panels. And even with acrylic, you can use a little bit of water to blend it on the interior too. Love using, and use your finger to kind of wipe it if you need to. Use your brush to kind of manipulate on the interior, the flow of the water. So I'm doing that darker color outlining these intersections. Bring in more water if you wish. But again, we're working light to dark, and acrylic you could do either way. But you could put a little bit more water on and then move it around on the inside of that door panel. And then we can always let it dry and do more work if we want to. It's absolutely up to you. But I'm just going to do on the interior of each of these panels. And then you have the option of doing the same thing on the door as well, like on the outside of the door. So we'll play with that in a minute here. But on the inside of these panels, inside of the wreath, this is all about experimentation if you're new to watercolors. You can pick and choose what mediums, again, that you want to use in these classes. I do a lot of acrylics, but I do watercolor colors every now and again, which is really fun. So that's the wreath. So the wreath is, again, popping and holding color there. I may do a little bit of blue outlining along this edge of the door. So like this, right next to the door frame, I might do a little bit of a darker blue outline. Just to see the edge. It's up to you on how much you want to blend this in or not. But just be playful and give it a shot. See how I just did a nice dark blue outline here? And I'm just filling it in ever so lightly. Which looks really fun and nice. It's very soft. And I can make my door darker. Some of you might have darker doors. That's absolutely fine. I'm just slowly filling in the door. You can, again, make it as dark as you want. I could even come in again once this dries and bring in more darker colors. That's fine. It's always progressive. You as the artist can choose, what you want to bring in from a paint pigment perspective. But the outlining is first on this door. And I will add green to my wreath and fill my wreath in a little bit more. But I'm just giving an opportunity for what's in the wreath right now just to dry a little bit. Maybe I'll make a little bit more of the blue pigment. And the less water you use when you use the pigment, the darker that color will be. And you can get a little blendy again once you bring some of that in. Up to you to choose those details, dipping your brush in a little bit of water. You can do the same thing if you're doing acrylic, but you can see how my door is really just kind of jumping off the page a little bit. I have some darker blues, I have some lighter blues. That's kind of what I was going for. That's one of the beauties of watercolor, just to play with creating that natural lighting, really, like some of that natural depth with some lightnesses and darknesses. And I can come in and I can paint the doorknob on and all that. So I like the door. It's fairly light in color. I'm going to come in and I'm going to finish my wreath just with some greens. So you go at your own pace here, but I'm going to come in with some greens. I'm going to mix a green of choice as everything's drying. And you always want to mix and find the colors before you put the paint on your canvas. You want to, there we go. You want to mix the colors over here first. So let's see here. I have a little bit of this green. Find the right color green. Now in my watercolor palette, I have a lime green, I have a grass green, and I have kind of a darker green. And I'm just playing with what colors I want to use here. And this is pretty heavy pigment, so this is going to be pretty dark in color. If I want to make this lighter as a touch, I can just add a little bit more water. And I'm just going to tuck green in a lot of different little places. I can use, again, it can be a darker, I could have less water and have more pigment. I like the green foliage coming through. If you want to have more specific leaf shapes than I do, I'm going pretty abstract tonight. It's just how the cookie crumbled here. You could do more specific shapes. I could have done deliberate, flower shapes within I'm sure some of you have done that. You could do deliberate flower shapes, deliberate leaf shapes within this. That's fine. I just did an abstract wreath, really, with lots of different colors. I had some pinks come through, which makes it look kind of springy, but that's all right. I still like it. But I could come in, this could dry, and I could come in and I could put some more leaf-like shapes on top with some darker colors. That's absolutely fine. I could do some really deliberate sprigs. with like a darker color. So let's try that. Let's try to see if I could do some darker green sprigs just to show you what that looks like. So maybe there's a little dot here and I just do a couple of sprigs kind of coming off. And I'm just doing little dots and maybe they just kind of come off around the edges a little bit. And if I want it dry in some areas, so these are maybe some deliberate sprigs. Some long areas, so you can play with bringing in different objects. And again, wherever you're painting, you want it to be fairly dry. These are just some dotted leaf sprigs, so little dots kind of that create a stick-like shape that makes it into a sprig-like look. I mixed some green and black together for that. So I would encourage you, if you want to bring your wreath to life a little bit, you could, let it dry for a minute and bring in different objects, whether if they're flower shapes or if you're adding in some sprigs. And I kind of went around in a circle and added just a few here or there. And I spaced them out so it looked natural. But the contrast is nice. And if you like the contrast and you want to do more of it, then do more of it, right? So I could, if I want to have a little bit more darker contrast, I could add darker red to this wreath, which I'll show you. I could add a few darker little green areas inside this wreath. We could spend an hour painting this wreath, but I'm just giving y'all some ideas, which is really fun. It's okay to layer on top of what you've done, right? Just like acrylics, you can layer in, especially if you want to have some darker contrast. You could bring in a darker red, or if you like purple, you could make a dark purple. That would look really nice. I'm just doing a little bit of some darker wreathing. Look at this wreath is like exploded. I love this. I'm so excited to see everybody's wreaths. Mine is just flourished. I'm going to stop painting though, because it's getting kind of big. But have some fun and play with your wreath and play with your door. And maybe I want you to play with your wreath and your door, and I want you to focus on the contrast of the door panels. So for me, I want to add a little bit more darker contrast around these rectangular panels. I like the colors I have right now as a base, but I'm going to make it a little darker. And one way I'm going to do that is by making a darker blue on my palette. Now that's really dark. I think I want it to be a little less bright blue. Oh, look at, I have a nice fun teal kind of color that's going. This might be a nice contrast. And right now that this is dry, which is good for me, I'm just going to outline these inner panels again with a nice straight line. Again, those outlines taking a few minutes to do sketching. It's really quite helpful for us. Now, if you wanted to take a little bit of water and kind of, if you're making any other darker choices, you can play with how you move. It looks a little antique-y. I'm kind of just blending this in with a little bit of water on this new darker color. And I mixed blue and green together to get this color, but everybody's working with different colors here. So if you want to add, if your door is light like mine, you want to add more contrast, find a darker shade of your door and do a little bit of outlining on those rectangular panels. You may have rectangular panels. You may have, I try to keep these nice and boxy. I got a little loosey-goosey here. Got a little rounded. I don't want rounded, Megan. And I'm just using a little water on my brush to kind of move this around. A little bit of this, a little bit of this here, a little bit of this there. You can use your finger to move things around or blot it if you want to. You can switch brushes if you want. I'm just using this number 3. It's working just fine. I'm just going to do the top corners a little darker. You can see how it's just adding a little bit more contrast. I'm going to do the same thing all the way around. So I'm making my door a little darker. Again, we're working light to dark. So you can pick and choose what you wish there. If you're doing acrylic, you don't need to work light to dark. You can kind of work any way you want, but I'm just giving some tips and tricks along the way here. Again, you can make things darker, but it's really hard to go back and make things lighter with watercolors, right? And this is all practice, all for fun. So I always welcome all skill levels to this, our classes. You can play with how light or how dark the paint pigment is. How much work, you want to spend in one space to another. Today's class will be about an hour and a half. So we're doing great for time. But we'll shift from the door and we'll give everybody 3 more minutes to finish your wreath and to finish playing with your door. If you need more time after that, feel free to take more time. I just want to make sure I have time to complete all of the other areas that we're playing with tonight. Nice straight line. Sometimes I use my pinky as a guide finger for a little structure, stability. But you can bring as much or as little contrast as you wish for your door area. I'm just gonna do a little bit more on the interior of these panels, like inside where the wreath is. So there's some nice contrast in there. And I'll add my handle to my door and all that after. So don't worry about if your door has no handle yet, don't sweat that. And then I'm gonna do a light erase on the door frame. And I'm gonna do like a light gray. I think I'll just do like a light gray around for the door frame, just so it's not pure white. I'm just doing a soft erase for the pencil marks because I went pretty hard with the lead. So I'm just doing a soft erase on that door frame. I'm going to stay within those lines, but I just don't want to see that pencil. And if you see a little pencil, it's no big deal. I got to figure out what color I want my house to be. Janice may have inspired me to do a yellow house. That could be kind of fun since she did her yellow door, but we'll see. So I'm going to do just a light gray door frame. If you wanted to do a dark door frame, you could, absolutely up to you. I'm going to do a light gray. So a light gray is basically, you can put a little bit of black. If you might have a gray, but I'm just do a little bit of black and then I'm just going to add some water to it. So it's just a gray and I'll do that right here. And this is near my green down here. Excuse me. So I'm just going to be careful. And I'm just going to outline the door frame with this gray. Nice straight lines. And I'm doing wet paint on a dry surface. So with watercolors, you'll learn about applying wet paint on a wet surface, applying wet paint on a dry surface, or a dry brush with a dry surface. There's a lot of different ways you can apply watercolor paint. I have dry paper and I'm doing those nice, smooth, clean outlines for the gray door frame. And you can fill this in like a flat color. You can play with moving colors around. Absolutely up to you. No matter you're using watercolor or acrylic. So I'm just outlining the door frame. I feel like I need to paint my house a color. I don't know what color my house should be yet. What color are you all painting your house? Does anybody have any ideas? Just doing a gray door frame. I mean, I could keep it a white house. I don't know. We'll see. I'm just gonna do a gray door frame so it kind of stands out a little bit. In the inspiration, there's just gray paneling. So we could just do gray paneling. And that could be kind of fun. Or you could choose a soft color for the house itself. And I'm filling in the frame, door frame with just a little water. So it just has a little bit of a washy look to it. You can do this any way that you wish, but you can see I'm just filling it in just enough. If you don't want to do this, you don't have to. I'm just following my intuition of what I want to try tonight. And that's why I want you all to show up to each of these classes. Is you can have you know, as much or as little expectations of yourself as you wish. I always love just showing up and being my authentic self and incorporating some fun ideas. I do want to fill my wreath in a little bit more. Let's see here. Maybe I'll do a little bit of like a darker red. I have a little bit of white gaps coming through my wreath, and I really would like it for it to be a little darker. So I'm making kind of a cranberry color over here. And I'm just gonna pop this in here and there. Just want to fill some of these nooks and crannies. And we'll shift on, we'll keep moving on, but if there's little updates you want to make along the way, it's okay to go back to your wreath and make adjustments. People think that there are rules, a lot of formal rules with art. I mean, there is, but the most important thing is just to follow your gut. If you want to go and tweak and update something, update something. If you see something you want to, you know, change something. I am just filling my wreath in. I don't want to see any white. So you can choose maybe what your filler color will be for your wreath. And this darker color is good. It's making it look a little more fall-like. I could add a little bit more red. So this is like purpley. And I could put some more specific leaf-like shapes if I wanted to on top. You could put little berries. You could put little flowers. But I like having a visual kind of pattern or similarities all the way around. So if I'm adding a little dark purple on the left, I'll add a little dark purple on the right. And we talk about that a lot in my classes, about that symmetry or that balance to the eye. So kind of lean back in your chair and you'll know when your wreath is done. You'll know when your door is pretty close, right? So I like the contrast that I'm adding here. They kind of look like darker little berries kind of tucked in. This is the evolution. We have so many fun evolution moments in our art classes, and this is a fun one. Like I added those sprigs, right? Okay. I'm gonna do a light erase on my siding. I'm gonna still see it, but I don't want to see all the lines. So I'm just gonna do a soft erase on my siding. So you at home, you can see your own lines. And I'll talk through, and if you don't have a pencil, don't worry. I'll talk through the technique we'll do for filling in our siding. And if you're still working on your door, don't worry. Work on your door. But we're gonna switch to the siding, we'll switch to the stairs. So we can stay on track from a time perspective. Now, even though tonight's class is only about an hour and a half or so, I encourage you to go at your own pace, always with these classes. If you're watching the video, you can always pause the video. I'm just doing a soft erase on the siding so I can see it. And then I'll talk through the technique as we mix our paint. So for me, my house is going to be light in color. And I'm gonna do yellow because why not? So I'm going to use this 3 brush. I'm just really feeling my 3 brush tonight. I want you to find a color for your house and mix it on your palette here. And I want it to be nice and light colored. This is like a mustard. Oh my God, can you imagine a mustard house? That's kind of, I have a lot of yellow in here. Let's see, a lot of orangey has happened. I'm gonna do a light yellow. And this is pretty bright yellow. So I'm gonna, actually I have a little bit of white pigment here. I'm gonna see if I bring a little bit of white pigment in here, see if it'll soften it for me. I'm gonna go for like a light canary yellow. So I'm gonna use a bunch of water to really dilute this color. See how it's getting lighter. And then the trick is that you're gonna leave a little bit where the line is. You're gonna paint below the line. I'll zoom down a little bit for you. And while this is wet, you're gonna dip your brush in water and you're gonna kind of move the paint pigment around. So you have some darker areas and some lighter areas. See that? And you're just gonna kind of let it flush off the left. Now you're gonna kind of rinse and repeat. You're gonna have little kind of white gaps. I'm doing below the line and kind of above the other line. And I'm just using, dip your brush in a little water and just move it around. So you can see I'm going really light here. I like that. I can, again, starting lighter, ladies and gents who are here with us, starting lighter, you can always make something darker, right? So you're painting below and above the line. So it looks like there's a little bit of a white gap. Starting with a lighter color house first, you can always add that darker pigment. And I'm just gonna start on one side. And if you wanted to do wet on wet, you could. You can kind of outline the space with a little bit of water if you want to be playful and play and see what happens. Or you could do wet on dry, wet brush on dry paper, or wet paper on wet brush. You can play with that. There's very little risk here with painting our house. And you can kind of get nice and boxy next to the door. So, you know, kind of square paneling, square siding right near the door. In some areas, you may have a little more pigment, a little less, but you can always come in and add some more. So I added a little bit more yellow to that one. But starting lighter gives you the control. Again, using water to soften something if you need to. And I'm just going to work my way around the door. And you can let something dry and go back in and modify it. So don't worry about that too much. I'm doing a little bit of a rough outline of that top siding, and I'm dipping my brush in a little water, moving it around. Now the gap in between panels is up to you. So I am just wiggling this around, doing some nice paneling. If you hear my baby, he's coming down the stairs. I'm just gonna do some soft paneling here. I'm gonna go around and just create the paneling of my home. You should be fine. There we go. And just keep painting the house. And just take a couple minutes to play with this step. And if you have any questions, let me know. Right. And I'm just going to use a little water. And a little bit of paint pigment. I may have acquired a special guest in my arms, so if anybody hears anything, that's what you hear. All right. And then I'm just gonna fill in these panels. I love that I have like a nice soft edge. You can see it's a little inconsistent with color. It's okay. If you happen to have a little more color, just use your finger and blot the color if you're using watercolor. If it's too dark in some areas, but you can come in again, working light to dark. You can always make areas darker after. So if you want to keep things nice and light now, and then come in and make it darker, like adding some of that shading properties, you can do that after. So you can play with what you're comfortable with, but this is a great way to experiment with bringing color on, playing with the temper of like how light or dark something is. We don't do this that often, so this is really fun. We do a lot of acrylic in these classes, so having a few minutes to play with watercolors, quite fun. And if you're not doing watercolor tonight, no big deal. If this inspires you to do watercolors, you can buy some really, really affordable watercolors really anywhere. This set that I bought right here, I'll drop a link down below. This was like $13 on Amazon, and I've done like tons of classes, and look how much paint pigment I have left. Like these watercolors last so long, does not need to cost you an arm and a leg. So if anybody wants to try it, in the YouTube link, I'll post a link to the set that I use. And it's not like a super fancy watercolor set either, and it works great. for beginners. So I encourage you to try it if you want to. And then I just watercolor paper. You can buy it really affordably. I just buy a pad. You can leave the paper right on the pad, or you can, rip it off. I ripped this off tonight because I had a little orange on the bottom from another project. So I was like, I'll just take it off. But I'm just working my way around my door here, filling this in. Yeah. And I like the yellow. It's nice and soft. It's really quite nice. I don't know about the fall scene, ladies and gents here. I have like this spring situation happening. But if I had a pumpkin or something on the stoop, or I had some foliage flowers around the top, we can turn this into fall pretty quickly here. I'll just put a couple pumpkins on the stairs and that'll be fall pretty quickly. There we go. And usually for these classes, I try to keep them about an hour and a half or so. We can go over that tonight if we need to, no big deal. We'll just see how it goes. I love this. I'm just having fun with filling in the color. Your painting's gonna look a little different as you dry too. And you can see how this looks a little different over here now that it's drying. That's where you can make modifications, right? By doing light to dark, whether you're, doing watercolors or acrylic, it just gives you a little bit more control. If you're using acrylic, you can easily paint over something. Watercolors is not as forgiving, but they're both really fun mediums to play with. Really fun. And I'm going a little heavier with yellow over here on the right side of my door, which is fine. I'm not afraid. Not afraid. And I'm just staying within the lines. I'm leaving a little bit of a gap in between each of these panels. I'll probably do a little bit of yellow for the panel straight across the top of the door. And I'm just gonna have it be kind of fluffy and soft off the top. Like let it be free. If anybody wants to, put any decorative stuff on the top, you can. But I'm just gonna use water and just make it kind of distance itself off the top. The kind of the fun, one of the fun parts about watercolor. There you go. You can play with, for me, I notice I want to play with like the pigment around the door. I want it to be a little bit darker. So I'm just going to take a little bit of a line and just make the door frame a little bit darker. So from where my gray is, except I need two hands here. Let's see. Okay, I'm just going to do carefully. Oh, that's wet. So stay out of wet areas. I'm just gonna, if you ever need to kind of wipe something off with your finger, watercolor, you can do that pretty quickly. I'll do that door in a minute. If you wanted to, if your door is dry and you wanted to do like a little round black doorknob, you could do a little black doorknob. I might do that now that my door is dry. So you can shift into different, areas as you wish. I'm just going to do a little black doorknob over here, just doing a little circle. It's kind of tucked into my wreath a little bit. That's my doorknob. I'm just keeping it simple. If you wanted to do like the whole lock mechanism and stuff like the other one, I could actually do a little bit of that below it if I wanted to. So I went pretty dark, but if I wanted to do like a little bit of a door handle and a panel, I could just do a little bit of a door handle and a panel if I wanted to right here. And again, I can blot it with my finger. With watercolor, you can always take the corner of a paper towel and kind of make a modification if you need to. So I'm gonna let this dry. And then I can do some outlining. I'll do some darker outlining for this little door area. All right, so I want you all to focus on, if you wanted to add a little door handle, you can. I put a little knob in, I put a little bit of a light gray. I'm gonna do some really thin black outlining on the bottom of this like door handle area, but we're gonna shift to do some of the more decorative areas like the stairs in a minute. So take a minute to play with, finish up the door where you can, the door frame. I'm gonna add a little bit more contrast on the door frame because this gray is blending into the house for me. So I'm just gonna use of a little bit of this dark gray that I have here. And I'm going to do a little bit of detail work. So I'm gonna do a thin outline of a dark gray, thin line, thin brush around the door frame so the door frame stands out a little bit more. So I'm gonna take my brush, now that I have two hands again, and I'm gonna take a little bit of this darker color, and this paper is kind of folding up a little bit, so if it looks a little tipsy too, that's why. I'm just gonna do a little bit of a thin, slow brush stroke around my door frame. So it just jumps out a little bit more. You can play with this contrasting outlining as you wish. If you have a yellow door and you want to do a darker yellow line, you could do a darker yellow line. This is my frame. The trick is to do nice straight lines here, so your door stays straight. It is so hard, ladies and gents, to paint straight lines, so just do your best. Don't be too critical. It is hard. It is hard. And my paper is like a little bendy, so it may not look like straight in all the areas, but it's fairly straight. I should tape it down so it's not so loopy here. I will tape it down for you so you can see, because the watercolor paper moves around a little bit. And a lot of people tape watercolor, especially if it's not on your pad. You can tape it down to your table or tape it to a board. A lot of people tape watercolors to boards. Absolutely up to you. Terry, I know you've taken watercolor classes. If you have any tips to share with folks, feel free to share that. I love hearing, what you've learned in the past. If you want to share anything with anyone else on things that may have worked for you or not, feel free to share away. So I'm going to put pumpkins on my stairs. Exactly. So if you are excited like Terry and you want pumpkins in, I'm going to do a soft erase on my stairs. So I'm going to put the pumpkins on first, and I'm going to paint the stairs around the items. So if you're putting any items on your stairs, put them on the top of those lines first, and you might want to stagger, any objects. So you can put potted plants if you want to do potted plants. If you want to do those little lanterns, you can do lanterns. You choose. I'm going to get a little orange for my pumpkins. Again, I'm going to mix my oranges over here first. I'm going to do light colors first. Again, light to dark, because you use the darker colors. So I'm gonna do a little bit of an orange, tiny little orange pumpkin first over here. I'm gonna use the water to move it around. Putting it on top of that stair. And then I can add a little bit of darkness for contrast to the pumpkin. So there's a little pumpkin right there. And again, you can use your finger to kind of blot any of it up if you don't want as much contrast. Maybe do a light version first and let it dry. You can always add a little bit of the dark as you go too. That's fine. So I'm just going to put in a couple of small pumpkins. I might put another little one over here. I love the little pumpkins. I'm a sucker for the little pumpkins. And I'll probably add a little bit of darker contrast after, but I'm just going to do a little pumpkin there. Again, using your finger, you can do like a little pull off some of the pigment if you want, just by dipping your finger in that if you wanted to. And then I'm going to do, again, I had to have a couple pumpkins over here. I'm going to do another one over here. This one's going to be a little bit bigger on this side. Pumpkins can be round, they could be boxy, you can choose. But do the outline of your pumpkin first. You can take a little bit of water to fill it in. So light to dark. You can always add more contrast, more pigment to these pumpkins if you wish. So there's the pumpkins. And you can move the pigment around. It's a really fun way to play with. And you can bring in a little bit of a darker orange if you wanted to. So many things you can do with watercolors. You can bring in a little bit of a darker, pigment. And I can move some of this around as well. So you can kind of clean off your brush and just bring in water and move these colors around with the tip of your brush, which is really fun. A little water, and you can play with how you shift and you move the pigments around as it's floating around in the water. Now you can do the same thing with acrylics, believe it or not. You just need to have a little bit of a water, a little water movement on your canvas, which is absolutely possible. So I'm just gonna have some soft pumpkins. If I want to make them darker, I will. Just bring in a little bit darker pigment. But they'll start to dry, start to become a little more familiar with them, which is really fun. So maybe, the bottom of the pumpkin is a little darker than the top because it's a little more shaded. Maybe the top is a little lighter. So maybe I put a little bit of a darker pigment on the bottom of these pumpkins. You can you can brush your water in your water cup. You can clean off some of the pigment. Play around a little bit here. There's little risk. We're just having fun. So there's some of my pumpkins. I'm gonna let those dry. I will add a stem to these, but I'm just gonna let them dry first. I love adding a little bit of this darker contrast to the bottom. You can always clean off your brush if you have too much pigment on it. So those are fun. I am going to do, there's some leaves that are also on the stairs. So I'm gonna really make this a little bit more fall-like. I'm gonna get some dark orange, reddish orange going. It's kind of a brownish orange color actually. So maybe I'll put a little bit of brown and make a little bit of a brownish orange, true like burnt orange leaves. And I might put a couple of like little leaves on my stairs. And leaves can just be like flipping up or down. We know how much our trees produce in the fall, don't we? So much. If anybody wants to come and rake my yard, I will pay with paints and canvases and supplies. My husband is dreading painting, doing our yard. And I told him in between the baby's naps, I'll go rake our yard for us. Just give me a tarp. So I'm just doing a couple of fluttering of leaves just here and there. And I'm doing this now because and I can even put a couple of these same leaf colors like in my wreath to make it match. Imagine that everything matches. So I'm just gonna put a couple of these burnt orange colored leaves in my wreath up here to make it a little more fall-like. Because my wreath is just a little bit of everything going on. But I'm adding a little bit more. Look at that, it's a beautiful contrast, right? Talk about layering colors, so fun. I'm adding a little bit of this burnt orange to my wreath to kind of tie the colors together. So fun. Look at this fun layering. Love this. And I'm just doing a little dollop here of this dark orange. And look at now, it kind of all starting to tie together, which is really fun. And you can think about any other elements that you want to bring in before you do your steps. So the steps are like that background color. And any items you want to put on your stairs, we want to put in now. So we can fill in the steps after, okay? So I'm gonna do a little bit of a stem with like I have a dark black. You wanna make sure the orange is dry so the black doesn't bleed in. So if your black is not dry yet, don't go anywhere near your orange like I just did. Ah, no, don't do that. So I'm as impatient. I thought this was orange was. So I'm gonna stop because my oranges are still wet. So don't do what I did and add your black in until those are dry. But my door is dry and I can outline my door knob. So I'm going to outline my doorknob. See that? I did light to dark, did the fill first, and now I'm doing the dark outlining. You can do fun little details if you wish. Anything goes. If you want to outline your door for your door to stand out a little bit more. Everything's coming together. Just try to do straight lines. It's hard, especially when we get excited. Nice straight lines. So you can make your door stand out as much or as little as you wish. That's including your door frame, your paneling. You can add more contrast to your paneling on your house if you want to. It's absolutely up to you. I'm keeping the yellow soft on my house. I might add a little more contrast, but I'm going to focus on the elements down here below first. I think I'm going to do a little lantern. I'm going to do 2 little lanterns. I'll do one over here. The problem is, well, I'll just do a little one right here. I'll just do a little box. And I'm gonna do a little triangle on top of the box. Like a little circle on top. And I'll put a yellow glow on the inside. So if you wanted to do a little lantern, you could. I'm gonna do 2. There's a little lantern there. I'll make it darker. I'm gonna start light to dark, right? And then I'm just gonna do another little lantern here. So I'm just gonna do a little circle. This is a smaller lantern. That's all right. Again, optional if you want to do lanterns or not. And I'm gonna let these lanterns dry before I put any color inside of them. Again, you get with watercolor, you need to have a little bit of patience. And I'll probably darken the lanterns up a little bit. I might put a few more leaves in as everything's drying. I might put a couple of these like darker cranberry leaves in, kind of like tucked in here and there. So you can mix your colors. You can mix your cranberry and your oranges together, and those are all leaf colors, right? So I'll put a couple leaves over here by my pumpkin. Again, I have 3 steps here, so you can decide what you want to put and where. And you don't have to go too leaf crazy, but it's up to you. If your pumpkins are starting to dry, you could do your black stems. Mine are, I think, close. I think this one's good enough. Oh, no. So if it's wet, it's going to bleed right into it. So that one's a little wet, but I can at least get some of the stem in. You can see how it's bleeding right into the orange. I'm using my finger just to dab it. Which is kind of fun, right? To see what happens as you dab. Kind of gives a little bit of a shading technique, which is kind of fun. You want to add a little bit of shading on top. Kind of the pumpkins kind of settling in. So your pumpkins can have big stems or little stems. If you want to turn any of these into little jack-o'-lanterns, you can. Absolutely up to you. Little pumpkins. And then I'm going to add a little bit of gray. So just like we did for the house, I'm going to add a little bit of gray for the stairs. Now, I'm going to do this fairly specific. I'm going to come under the door. I have like a gray for a stair step. I'm going to come under the door, do a line under the door about halfway, and I'm going to kind of come down. So the shading is only on half of the step. Like that. It's going to be a little bit of a half shade. And I come down, use a little water, and it's going to be skinnier on the left, and it's kind of a half triangular shade. And you're not going to paint the whole stair. So I'm going to come down to the second stair, and you're just going to do a little bit of a line, and you're going to come down. I'm kind of painting around my leaves. Now you can play around with this as much or as little as you want, but it's going to be more shaded on the right side of the steps versus the left. You can dip your brush in a little bit of water. Again, working lighter to dark, you can start with lighter colors. I'm kind of just painting around those leaves. You can make your stairs as wide or as narrow as you wish, but you can see the shading effect that I'm kind of creating. You can make these as lighter, as dark as you wish. You want the bottom side of the stair to be lighter. See that, how it's creating that, the separation between the stairs? You can always make this darker, but start by doing it lighter. And you can do the same thing with acrylics too. Start with a lighter color or that darker color at the top of the stair and have it come lighter down. You can use white paint if you're using acrylics to soften, or you can just use water. So it's absolutely up to you. But you can see I'm kind of creating the look of stairs by having the bottom of the stair a little lighter. And I'm using a little water to rinse my brush and move around the paint pigment so it's not too dark. And these stairs can be as wide as you want. Absolutely up to you. Mine are fairly light, which is fine for right now because I can always make them darker. Just remember that. Lighter is okay because you can always make them darker. And that's the same with acrylic. So I'm going to let those stairs dry. If I want to make them a little darker, I can. You could do it right now if you wanted to. A little bit of a darker pigment. Ooh, see that shading that just happened there? I brought in a little bit darker of a pigment. I brought in darker pigment. I went and I rinsed my brush. I'm going to move the darker pigment down so it blends in. See that? Secondary contrast. So I got a little bit of darker pigment, put a little bit of, that's really dark, but wash off my brush and then blend that in and down. And if it's, you can use your finger to blot it. If you have watercolor, if it's too dark. So it's a little too dark for me right there. I just take my finger and blot it a little bit, move the paint pigment around with a little bit of a watery brush. So this is where you can use like wet on wet, right? A wet brush with a wet canvas to move that and see how that paint pigment flows. You can play with how much or how little water you want to use and if you wanted to apply it one way or another. It's absolutely up to you, so you can be playful here. I'm doing wet paint on the top of the dry, but then I'm adding water to it so I can move it around. So there's a lot of different ways to play around with this. You know, this is not like a professional watercolor class. We're here just to be playful as beginners. And if you come here as an expert, share your tips. I always welcome that, but we're here just to have fun and see how we do. But you can see I have some stairs that have appeared. If you want to come in and add some lighter colors to fill your stairs in a little bit, again, keeping that lightness at the bottom of the stair to show the step, that will help with our shading techniques. So while my stairs are drying, again, I went really light. I can always darken them. I'm going to come in and add a little bit of a glow inside my lanterns. And you can play with how much glow you want on the inside of your lanterns. How much pigment. That has a lot of water. I went a little water crazy on that one. There we go. And you can go right to the edge. You can use a corner of a paper towel to always like blot or pull up something if you need to. I'm doing water just inside of this lantern. I'm going to let it dry, a little light inside the lantern. And you can do, again, as much or as little detail here as you wish. As I look at mine, I may add a little more contrast to the house. This is where we just consider any final details. So for me, I may want a little bit of extra contrast. So maybe the top side of the paneling, has a little bit of a darker, lift on it. You do you. Even though tonight's class is only about an hour and a half, I encourage you to keep painting as long as you wish. Just adding a little bit more.
Thank you, Megan. I gotta run.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining. I can't wait to see your work. I encourage you all to upload
Okay.
any of your artwork to the Patreon app. We always love seeing it there. But I want to thank you all for joining. I can't wait to see your finished products. Thanks for being here, Terry. All right. I'm just gonna finish my house up. I'm just making the house a little darker. I'm gonna use my finger. I'm gonna blot some of this up. You can always take a corner of a paper towel to do blotting if you need to. Such a fun trick. Ooh, I'm just having fun. I with watercolor, sometimes you just need to experiment, not take things so seriously. I'm doing a little bit of a line and a little bit of a water wash under the line. And then I did a little blotting with my paper towel, and that's giving me some nice edging for my siding, like a little bit of extra contrast. I needed a little something extra with the house. The door could be a little bolder too. So again, we are all our own artists, and we'll always do as much or as little as we want. And each piece of art we do is all a little bit different. And I know that, many of you have taken these classes before, and it's always good for you to know, you'll know when you want to stop and you'll know when you want to keep going. So no matter where I'm at, always just kind of focus on where you are. And if you ever need any, tips or feedback, you're welcome to, comment in these live classes. But also if you're watching this remotely, you're welcome to post comments below. But it's always so wonderful to see you all in the live classes and see your faces and hear how you're doing, as always. So there's a little bit of paneling there. I'm just gonna do the same thing on the other side. My strategy was just doing a small line and then using water to flow it down just a little bit. Just a little bit of pigment. My yellow house. You can always make your pumpkin stronger in color. So again, we work light to dark with watercolors. You can add in more pigment if you want things to show up a little more bolder. That's fine. Watercolor, you typically, you take a little longer to, get it just right since we work light to dark. And acrylic is the same thing. You really just take your time, some initial steps, and then you figure out if you want to make additional layers to add additional detail. And adding depth with acrylic, which is what we're doing with watercolors as well, can really bring something to life. I could add a little darker orange to these pumpkins with watercolor or acrylic, and it really could transform them quite a bit. So it's just with anything, you do as much or as little as you wish. And if there's anything I can do to support any of your own updates, please let me know. I'm just gonna grab a corner of this paper towel. I'll just do a little blotting, help with the blending. If you see any pencil, you can always go back and erase it. I can see some of it, which is no big deal. I could definitely add some more contrast to my door. I could get a little crazy here in our final hours before I'm summoned back to my family. A little bit darker blue. I'm gonna get a little crazy here for a Sunday night. Let's see here. A little bit more of a darker blue on this door. So nice and slow, nice straight lines. It's hard to contain our excitement sometimes. Just doing a little bit more darker blue. I'm looking for a little more contrast, and that's helpful there. But everyone's has their own style for watercolors. How much or how little you do where you bring in a little bit of extra. So contrast for me is bringing in a little bit of darker blues in areas. But you do you. And if anyone has to leave soon, that's absolutely fine. I understand that. Just adding a little bit extra. Make my door look a little bit more, a little more antique-y. You can add in a little texture. I like the extra contrast. I'm gonna go around the top of the door. Just want my door to stand out a little bit more, and by adding a little bit darker of this blue I have is just allowing the door frame to just stand out just a touch more. And you can do these details with your wreath. I could come in and, readjust some of those sprigs, those dark green sprigs kind of got away from me. I could make some of those dark green sprigs come out again. And it's always fun to kind of walk away and come back to your art too, because you're going to be like, oh, I want to add something here. I want to make the pumpkins a little darker, or you could keep things really nice and light. So it's absolutely up to you and your own style. I'm just making some of these sprigs a little dark again. I like the contrast. I'm just doing little dots with the tip of my brush to create these sprigs that are kind of jumping out of the interior. It's making it look a little bit more holiday festive, a little bit more fall-like. There's so many beautiful greens out there that folks incorporate into wreaths. And no matter the time of the year, it's always so much fun to play with all the ways to decorate wreaths. I love this. I love this dark green that I'm just tucking in. Absolutely up to you. Think about what you could add to your wreath. And my wreath is really just continue to blossom, which I like. I like my wreath. So some of you are going to know when it's a good stopping point for your wreath. I am just continuing to kind of bring it to life. I like the contrast. I'm not going to do too much more, but I like a little bit of the dark green here and there. I may finish us out with a little more orange contrast in my pumpkins and then call it a day. But I encourage you I would love to see your work. If you wanted to take a minute to share, I would love to see it. A little dark orange with a little water. Just adding, I'm using a little water to blend this up and in. What did y'all think about tonight's class? I thought it was really fun. I hope you all have enjoyed it. I want to thank you for being here. Just adding a little contrast to these orange pumpkins, just a little bit of shading along the bottom. You can play with adding a little bit of, if you need to add any shading to if you did leaves, like I did a lot of random abstract leaves down here. If you wanted to re-outline your lanterns to be your lanterns, mine are very simple lanterns, as you can see. You can take a little bit of black paint or dark gray and just re-outline your lanterns. Again, if they're still wet, stay away from the yellow. But I'm just doing a little bit of outlining on these lanterns, and those will make them really stand out. You can do your stems. Oh, my lantern. It's a little wet here. All right. So I'm going to pause. For anyone joining virtually, please reach out with any questions, but I want to thank you all for being here.